Hi, Comic Book Nation, and welcome to a bonus spoiler cast episode for Marvel's Spider-Man 2. I am Logan Moore, and I am joined in the studio by Chris Killian and at home by our Marvel Spider-Man 2 reviewer, Cade Onder. We're going to be breaking down the general story overview of Spider-Man 2 today, along with all of the spoilers for the game. So if you have not played the game and you don't want to know what happens, maybe come back after you have played the game or just spoil yourself here and join us for this discussion. Cade, I want to start with you and this game has a lot of great moments throughout it. There are a lot of big surprises. Insomniac was very secretive about this game leading up to its release. What were some of the biggest things that stood out to you about the game after having played through all of it?
Story beats seeing Miles and Peter fight each other is pretty sweet.
Yeah.
You know, I think a lot of us expected that going in at some point. But it wasn't necessarily a foregone conclusion, since historically Peter sheds the suit by himself, usually. Getting to play as Venom, I think if you want to combine story and gameplay, that's a pretty big moment. Everyone hoped to see that, but God of War Ragnarok cheaped out on us last year, not letting us use Thor's hammer. And so Insomniac said, we're not gonna do it. We're not gonna blue ball you. We're gonna give you what you want. And I thought that was everything I wanted it to be. I only wish there was more of it, but getting a small taste of that, getting to see the power and capabilities of Venom firsthand, and then realizing I'm gonna have to fight this, was pretty good way of setting the stage.
You and I talked a lot over the past couple months about everything we would like to see in this game, and I think pretty much everything that we wanted to see came to pass eventually. Chris, for yourself, was there anything that happened in the game that you weren't expecting or anything?
So much, man. There was so much stuff in this game. This game is chock full of surprises, to the fact that when I've been talking about this game, I've been telling everybody, please avoid spoilers, because there's so many surprises in that. I mean, from Harry showing up for the first time as Agent Venom, and yeah, Cade mentioned, getting to play Venom himself, seeing the Peter Miles fight, anti-Venom, and how that ties into Mr. Negative's powers, and MJ, being turned into Scream. I mean, there's so many good, just excellent things that happen in this, surprise-wise. And I think that like the story beats, I mean, the game feels, I mean, even though it's 20 plus hours or whatever, it's just so seamless. It just leads into the next part no problem. There's so much stuff I love about this game.
I think everything that happened from Venom getting introduced onward is just them putting the full pedal to the metal, basically. You mentioned Scream, which I think is probably the biggest surprise of the game to me.
Oh, yeah.
I was not expecting Scream to be in this whatsoever. If another symbiote was going to show up, I assumed it would be Carnage, who kind of also shows up, and we'll talk about that here in another video or in another part of this conversation. The Scream moment, though, really stood out to me quite a bit, and also the anti-Venom stuff, because I think my biggest question coming into the game was just how they were going to keep Peter's symbiote powers and let players continue to use those powers, because it was so clear that they weren't going to introduce all these mechanics and then tear them away from the player in the final hours of the game, because that's the big gameplay draw of this. Peter becoming anti-Venom, I think, was a big moment in this game, and I think I'm curious to see what they do with that in the future, because there's obviously going to be another game, but that surprised me quite a bit. I want to talk specifically, though, about what you guys thought of Harry being Venom, because this is a big change, and this is something they set up in the previous game, obviously, but Eddie Brock not being Venom was kind of the big...
we talked about this a little bit earlier, and the way I would say that I feel about this is that, when it was first teased that Harry might possibly be Venom, the inner nerd in me, it really pissed me off. I really hate that. But I will say that Spider-Verse 2 sort of changed my outlook on these situations, and that there are canon events that happen, along Spider-Man, and we've seen the Eddie Brock story, told several times. I mean, it's in Spider-Man 3, it's been we've seen it in so many different mediums, that I appreciate that Insomniac was trying to tell a different story, in the same way that I appreciate that what Rocksteady was doing with Red Hood and Arkham Knight and things like that. I mean, it's not the story that I'm used to, but it was a great story, and they told it really well, so I was happy with it.
I was always for the idea of Harry as Venom. I wanted it to be Peter as Venom, because I thought that'd be even crazier, and I was just you know what, I'm up for something brand new, let's try it. And I really thought they were gonna do it, because as the game progresses, he gets his symbiote, he left 2 symbiote suits from the normal symbiote that you get in the game. One's like a lot more monstery, and he has that like sleepwalking sequence where he's just messing people up. I was like, oh my god, they're actually gonna do it. They don't, but I really like the idea of having someone we've already established in the previous game as someone very important to Peter, coming back into his life and then having to try and not kill him, right? It's not that he wants to kill him, he's trying not to kill him, but knowing that, there's a 1% chance that it does happen. So I really like the idea of it, and I like how they executed it, and I think Harry is a strong character, and it seems like he'll probably be back at some point.
Oh, he's definitely coming back.
But how will he be back? Is he going to be
that G serum
Gobby Jr. or is he going to be
Goblin?
Yeah, I don't know. Cade, one thing you mentioned before that I wanted to talk about was the Peter and Miles boss fight, because that's such a pivotal moment of this game. That was something I really wanted, and honestly, what I wanted to see from that was for Peter to really mess up Miles, and then to see his own mistakes and like kind of try to tear himself away from the suit on its own. But I also think it's really interesting that he was so overtaken by the suit that he really couldn't pull himself away from it unless Miles kind of intervened, which I think is an interesting kind of wrinkle on this symbiote storyline, because a lot of times Peter kind of has to do it all himself.
It takes away a little bit of Peter's own heroicism, right?
Yeah.
No, the one thing I kind of also like don't love about this game, I think the boss fights are a little clunky in this game, and they go on for a really long time. Like, just before you fight Peter as Miles, you fight Kraven for like 40 minutes. It's like a really long time. I think sometimes boss fights can take away from the emotional like levels that a boss fight can have. Like, you have these two characters battling good and evil, and there's something about I'm getting caught on a tree and something weird's happening, my punches aren't landing. I'm like, all right, and the music's great, but the gameplay isn't lining up. But I think they still get the point across in a way that is still satisfying, and more or less calls back to Peter Parker battling Doc Ock at the end of the first game of defeating your mentor, and this time at least Peter Parker is able to be redeemed.
Now, I thought, too, that, like, the boss fights, I thought they were truly epic in this game. I thought they were so much better than the first game. I didn't start feeling how long they were until the final fight with Venom. Like, on the, when you're going back and forth between, like, the football field and the basketball court, that whole section, that's when I started being like, okay, I got it. It felt so much more fresh to me when it was going from Peter to Miles fighting Venom, then to Peter fighting Venom again. I like those sequences, but some of the sequences in between that were just taking so long to get there. It was a little bit of a drag. That would have been my one criticism of some of the gameplay itself. That's what I'm with you.
I think they would have done a better job had they sprinkled boss fights throughout the game with each character. Like, you fight Kraven once, I guess twice technically with Venom, but instead of we're going to have multiple stage boss fights back to back to back to back, I think that was probably not the best way of going about it. I imagine that's like, we don't want to overdo it in terms of the pacing. We want to make sure you're not like getting in there and then he gets away. Like, that's probably unsatisfying, but at the same time, it's like, I think you could have built a stronger hero to villain relationship there by having more engagement with them, and I don't necessarily know they got that across completely.
Kate, I know you and I talked about this a couple days ago, but I think the strongest boss fight in the game is the initial Sandman fight. Like, they really go over the top right away with that Sandman fight, in my opinion. Like, the scale of that fight is so blown up and is so just crazy. It's what you would expect from a large scale Sandman fight in the game, and I think the way Insomniac capitalized on that was fantastic, and it really gets its hooks into you quickly, but I don't feel like they ever reach the same height there that they do.
See, I disagree with you there. I felt that way about the first game. I felt like the Kingpin sequence in the first game was like the peak of the game, and I don't feel like they ever got back to there. For me, for this game, there were so many boss fights that I loved. I did love the lizard fight and all the sequences that, going through that.
Chasing him through the streets and stuff like that.
Yeah. I thought that was fantastic. And the way they don't really show him for some, like the first half of that. Yeah. I loved that. I love the Peter Miles Miles fight, fighting Kraven with Venom was so cool. Like, there were definitely some really cool sequences that I don't think the Sandman fight completely overshadowed.
Yeah, I think the Sandman fight was still the best. I do agree, though.
No, I think you can have your favorite.
I am more on your side, though, than I think Cade's. I think the boss fights in this game are a huge step up compared to the previous Spider-Man game in particular. I think the Doc Ock fight was particularly good in the last game, and then a lot of the other ones I really don't remember.
I just remember my initial feeling. It's been a while since I played the game, but my feeling about that game in general was that it was sort of anticlimactic. Like, it felt like the game felt really long, and then it rushed into the Sinister Six sequence.
It does rush,
and then it's the Doc Ock thing, and then the game's over, and it just felt fast in a weird kind of way. Like, but that's just my initial memories. I say that having not played the game in 3 or 4 years.
I was gonna say, I know you're gonna upset Cade with that one, because I know Cade thinks the other game is definitely better. That's gonna do it for this discussion about the broad overview. We're going to be back with another video here talking about the ending in more detail and some of the kind of final teases that they do in the post credits.
We didn't even get to talk about how Kraven got underutilized in this game. Where are we going to talk about that? Are we going to talk about that?
We'll talk about that in another video.
We're going to talk about that in another
be sure to stay tuned here on our comicbook.com YouTube channel, and we're going to have more Spider-Man 2 videos coming out here in the coming days.